Hey everyone out there in the podcasting world, this is Widescreen Podcast. This is Sam Wiles. You are listening to another episode of
Trimming the Musical Fat.
What's that smell?
Oh, that would be me. I've been swimming in raw sewage. I love it. I love it. That's the signal. Let's go. Do it.
Against all odds, we're back for another episode of Trimming the Musical Fat, the podcast where we trim albums that are too damn long. I'm Stephen Nicholson.
And I'm Paul Nicholson.
And together we're going to be taking our invisible touch scissors to British musical icon Phil Collins and his mega-selling 1989 release, But Seriously. What's going to make the under 50-minute single vinyl TTMF supercut of the album? Another Day in Paradise? Do you remember? Something happened on the way to heaven? Keep listening to find out. We'll also find some time to share some Phil jokes, talk about seeing him live, revisit 1989, hear archive interview clips, debate when Phil should have called it a day, and share our favourite Phil Collins songs. And we'll also answer as many questions as we can about the man in only 3 minutes. So, Paul, we're talking Phil Collins today. What's your level of fandom when it comes to Phil?
I think he's really good. I think I'd probably say I'm more of a Genesis fan than a Phil Collins fan. In fact, it was probably through Genesis that I got into Phil Collins. But I'm not a massive fan, but I want to stick up for him because I think he gets a lot of unfair criticism because I suppose he epitomises the 80s, but he did a lot of good stuff, and I don't think it's fair that he gets criticised all the time in the media.
Well, do you remember the first Phil Collins solo song you bought?
It was I Wish It Would Rain Down, the single. I think it was February 1990. I remember buying the single. I thought it was a great song.
Yeah, I remember you buying that. I remember the video being played on the chart show as well. Very good video with Eric Clapton.
Yeah, a bit like a kind of Magic Queen, a bit, like the way they're dressed and stuff.
In terms of my fandom for Phil, yeah, I like Genesis as well. For solo Phil, I'm a fan, more of a casual fan rather than an obsessive. And I think the first Phil Collins related thing I ever bought was the Invisible Touch album cassette, which was one of the first albums I ever bought. And I still love it and still holds a dear place in my heart. I think solo-wise, the first thing I bought was either the But Seriously CD or the Both Sides of the Story CD single. And I bought the Both Sides album when that came out as well. So, but yeah, I think it might have been But Seriously was the first thing I bought.
I think also for me, the first actual album of his that I bought would probably have been his hits album compilation. I think it was 98. That was probably, in fact, it's the only Phil Collins album other than Genesis that I've bought.
Yeah, well, I remember buying for Dad's Christmas one year the Hits Live,
The live album
from 1990, I think it was. Yeah, getting him that for Christmas.
Yeah, I remember that Christmas.
So I heard a lot of the solo stuff through that. Yeah.
Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you. In paradise. Ooh, yes, I wish it would rain down on me. Ooh, yes, I wish it would rain on me. You know, you can run and you can hide, but
Okay, it's the tale of the tape. But seriously, the fourth studio album from Genesis singer and drummer Phil Collins. Released in November 1989, it was preceded by the US #1 single, Another Day in Paradise. This was the follow-up to the 25 million selling 1985 album, No Jacket Required. The album was produced by Collins with Hugh Padgham. Like the previous three solo albums, the front cover is a single photo of Phil Collins. There are 12 songs on the album, and they are Hanging Long Enough, That's Just the Way It Is, Do You Remember, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, Colours, I Wish It Would Rain Down, Another Day in Paradise, Heat on the Street, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, Find a Way to My Heart, A Father to Son, and All of My Life. The album is 60 minutes in duration, which means we need to lose at least 12 minutes today. There were 6 singles released from the album, but only 5 of them in the US. The singles were Another Day in Paradise, I Wish It Would Rain Down, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, That's Just the Way It Is, Do You Remember, Hanging Long Enough.
What do you do to keep it fresh for you? I mean, how do you keep changing your act, changing? Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't.
Well, you just don't really think about it too much. You know, you just write what comes to you. I mean, as Steve was saying earlier, you know, my last album was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So there's been all that time, really, of trying to sort of stockpiling things in my mind and then writing this new album. So you just try and keep up with whatever you want to do. I mean, I don't really listen to too much other music. I listen to bits and pieces in the car sometimes, but I'm not overly influenced by what's going on.
Everything evolves very naturally then.
Yeah.
So upon its release in 1989, some of the sales facts for it were that it spent 15 non-consecutive weeks at #1 in the UK, including the whole competitive Christmas season, and at the end of 1989 became the third biggest selling album of the year in the country after only 6 weeks on sale. It became the biggest selling album of 1990 in the UK, but seriously also peaked at #1 in the US Billboard Top 200 for 4 weeks and became the second biggest selling album of 1990 in the US. According to Billboard, it was the last #1 album of the 1980s. So this is a critical opinion of the album when it came out, and it was from J.D. Considine from Rolling Stone magazine, and they had said that the album, when it works, as it does in the Homelessness tune, Another Day in Paradise, the album can be wonderfully involving. Trouble is, but seriously, just doesn't work often enough. What helps Paradise make its point is the way Collins personalises the issue, homing in on that twinge of guilt most of us feel while trying to ignore street people, then grounding it with a negatively effective hook. Atlantic Records initially placed a sticker on the CD version that read 2 bonus tracks, which Collins disagreed with and clarified that they were extra songs. The sticker was changed accordingly. So the album sold 21 million copies worldwide, which is around 7 times the sales of Buster, which came out the previous year, the soundtrack. So although Buster was the album that came out the previous year, that was classed as a soundtrack, and the previous official Phil Collins album would have been 1985's No Jacket Required. It went 9 times platinum in the UK and 4 times platinum in the US, with extra streaming figures sales amounting to 177,000, which was 50% higher than the sales of Buster. And Another Day in Paradise was the most streamed track from the album, with an extra 110,000 sales onto it.
In spite of that rapturous reception, let me ask you a question. Just imagine that you're sitting in that audience, you don't know who Phil Collins is, and I say, coming on now is a sex symbol, a singer of romantic songs, a film star, and a pop idol. Who would you imagine would come round that door?
Well, anyone but me, I suppose. I suppose that's what you're getting at, isn't it? No, it never ceases to surprise me.
What surprises you?
Well, I mean, that kind of feeling, you know, I mean, in America, for instance, we have a very young audience, and a lot of them are 16, 17-year-old girls. And the underwear thing was, I on the Genesis tour when there was an enormous amount of underwear on stage after the first night. And so we thought, well, we'll keep this, you know, because we thought as it was the first night, this is going to happen every night. So it happened for the second night and for the third night. And we had this big box of stuff, you know. And then someone nicked it, which is very strange, because the only thing stranger than throwing underwear is actually someone stealing someone else's underwear.
That's very odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
The nice thing about you, it seems to me, is that you're not really concerned about that thing called image, which a lot of stars are you?
Well, no. I mean, there's a traditional rock star, as it were, and I don't really fit into that sort of mould. I mean, you know, this is what I've got to work with, you know, what you see here, and that doesn't really sort of conjure up sort of Paul Young, Simon Le Bon, that kind of traditional thing. So I've never really bothered with it, to be honest, and that's what makes this other thing even more surprising, because you just go out there. I mean, I relate more to the normal person because I am a normal person, I suppose.
These are the top 10 best-selling singles for the year 1989 worldwide. And at number 10 is Lambada by Kaamo. At number 9 is Bat Dance by Prince. At number 8 is Love Shack by the B-52s. At number 7 is the classic Swing the Mood by Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers. At number 6 is Right Here Waiting by Richard Marx. At number 5 is Eternal Flame by the Bangles. At number 4 is The Loop by Roxette. At number 3 is She Drives Me Crazy by the Fine Young Cannibals. At number 2 is Another Day in Paradise, Phil Collins. And the number 1 best-selling single worldwide from 1989 was Like a Prayer by Madonna.
Wow, it's such an eclectic top 10, isn't it? It's just so diverse. You know, Jive Bunnies, old school, you know, taking 40s, 50s rock and roll, mixing it up, next to the alternative band B-52s. Love Shack's a classic. Then you got Prince in there. Obviously, love Prince, love Bat Dance, Roxette, classic song from them. The Bangles, another classic. Madonna, Like a Prayer. Can't argue with that. Actually surprised. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I didn't realise Another Day in Paradise was as successful as it was in terms of sales. But yeah, that's just a real snapshot in time, that top 10 really, isn't it?
It's funny as well seeing the Lambada there. That was that song that went do, 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 like a sort of Latin dance.
I mean, I did buy a few of those. I mean, Prince. I never got around to buying the B-52s, although I love it. Bangles I bought, Roxette I bought. I never got round to buying Phil Collins there, but I did like it. And the same with Madonna. Never got round to buying the single, but got it on her Immaculate Collection the following year.
So these are the top 10 albums worldwide. And at number 10 is Pump by Aerosmith. At number 9 is Nick of Time by Bonnie Raitt. At number 8 is Disintegration by The Cure. At number 7 is Hangin' Tough by New Kids on the Block, or NKOTB as they became known. At number 6 is Forever Your Girl, Paula Abdul. At number 5 is Rhythm Nation 1814 by Janet Jackson. At number 4 is Batman by Prince. At number 3 is The Raw and the Cooked by the Fine Young Cannibals. At number 2, Like a Prayer by Madonna. And the number 1 album is But Seriously by Phil Collins.
So Phil lost the singles battle but won the album battle.
He lost the battle but won the war.
Yeah, some good stuff in there. Very pop, very American. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of ones that I own, Phil, yep, Madonna, Prince. Don't think I had. I remember buying. In fact, I got it for my Christmas. The 7-inch single of the title track of Janet Jackson's "The Rhythm Nation" song, which was brilliant. Still think that's a great tune. Bonnie Raitt, that's a surprise.
But it's a bit like...
I'm going to suggest big sales in America.
It's a bit like that Garth Brooks, remember, every week on America's Top 10, Roping in the Wind or something. It's like, nobody had heard of it over here, but it was massive. Are you surprised about Aerosmith being number 10?
Not really. That had a lot of hit singles off that. And again, very, very popular in the US. Yeah,
and I had Love in an Elevator. That was the single that I'd bought. I remember getting a free patch with it.
Yeah, Janie's Got a Gun. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Okay, so we're now on to what arguably is maybe the best year for movies. they're not necessarily all in the top 10, but it was a really good year for worldwide top 10 grossing movies of 1989. So at number 10 is James Bond's License to Kill. At number 9 is Ghostbusters 2. Number 8 is The Little Mermaid. At number 7 is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. At number 6 is Lethal Weapon 2. At number 5 is Dead Poets Society. At number 4 is Look Who's Talking. At number 3 is Back to the Future Part 2. At number 2 is Batman. And the number 1 grossing movie of 1989 worldwide was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah, a lot of films in there I really enjoy. Usually you go through this and you think, really? But they're all, yeah, I mean, they're all good to great movies. I think Ghostbusters 2 is obviously not a patch on the original Ghostbusters, but it's still fun. License to Kill, I think, is a very underrated James Bond movie. I think Lethal Weapon 2, I actually prefer that to the original. And yeah, you got Batman and superb, and Indiana Jones, superb.
Do you know what was quite, when you look at it as well, 3/4 of the films are parts of franchises. So even if it was the first film, they'd then do a sequel, or because I even think they did a Little Mermaid too. I think it might have been a straight to DVD, but probably
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
with the exception of Dead Poets Society, I think they're all parts of franchises. So we're now doing events that happened this year. So 1989 was a turning point in political history because a wave of revolutions swept the Eastern Bloc in Europe, starting in Poland and Hungary, with experiments in power sharing coming to an end with the opening of the Berlin Wall in November. And if myth has it, was that David Hasselhoff played a big part in that.
of course he did. He was the key figure.
That's right. In April of that year, we had one of the massive football tragedies, the Hillsborough disaster, claimed the lives of 94 Liverpool supporters in the game in Sheffield, and a further 3 dying later. And Taylor Swift was born this year also.
Yep, you've got to the important stuff.
Can't believe like those things will be 32 years, almost 33 years now. I know, and you think how much has changed since because you went to Germany the following year, didn't you? The year after the wall came down.
Yep, and you still at that point had I went to Berlin, school trip, and at that point you still had East Berlin and West Berlin. You still had the wall, but although that was in the process of organising what a unified Berlin and Germany was going to look like. But yeah, it was. I'm so glad I got the experience because both sides were a total contrast to each other. On the East Berlin side of things, total austerity there. Everything was very grey. Obviously, much stricter in what you could do, and so on. What you could eat. If you went to a restaurant, you basically were served what their main meal was for the day. So very, very Eastern European bloc. And then you went over into the West and get anything you want over there. Obviously much more vibrant, colourful, decadent. But I think one of the things I'll always remember is, obviously in Europe, a lot of the countries are much more relaxed about things like nudity. And I just always remember wandering into, bear in mind your teenage boys, you're wandering in to the showers and there's naked women showering there, and the steam room, it was naked as well. We just go, what? What is this brilliant place? But yeah, and then the other thing I remember is actually going to the Berlin Wall. You weren't allowed to go to the wall on the eastern side. That was guarded by soldiers with obviously automatic rifles and such like. On the western side, they were renting out chisels and stuff, so you could go down on that side and chip away bits of the wall, so you could take them away as souvenirs. I remember my friend Malcolm popping his head through, as Malcolm would do, poking his head through a hole, poking a head through the wall, onto the eastern side. The soldier just shouted at him. Like, Malcolm, you're going to get your head blown off here. But yeah, brilliant. So very, very lucky to have had that opportunity just before Yeah, it was consigned to history.
Do you still have that piece of the wall?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got them.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Berlin.
From the Berlin Wall specifically, take a look at them. They've been there since last night. They are here in the thousands. They are here in the tens of thousands. Occasionally they shout, Die Mauer muss weg, the wall must go. Thousands and thousands of West Germans come to make the point that the wall has suddenly become irrelevant. Something, as you can see, almost to party on. How do you measure such an astonishing moment in history? The East German government said tonight they were going to make more openings in the wall, at least a dozen more, put bulldozers right through the wall so that more people could cross to the west. The East German communist leadership tonight said there'd be a new election law guaranteeing secret elections which the rest of the world could monitor. And only 24 hours after East Germans were told they could go anywhere, anytime, the Soviet Union said that was a sensible move.
It's one more night that we're doing Trim the Talk, the feature where we are all asked the same questions and have to answer them all in 3 minutes or less. So, Paul, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, the timer starts now.
3 minutes start now.
Describe Phil Collins in 3 words.
Talented, cheeky chappy.
I would say undervalued, prolific drummer. Have you seen him live?
Yes.
Yep, so have I, twice. We'll talk about that after. Your favourite Phil Collins album?
No Jacket Required.
Mine's is Both Sides. Your favourite Phil Collins song?
Against All Odds.
Yep, same for me. What were you doing at the time of the album's release in November 1989?
Not long started high school, so probably not very happy. But music would help me keep me through it. Music was my medicine.
Good. Well, I was in my 4th year of high school and I was getting ready to do practice exams and working part-time at a supermarket. When and where did you first hear But Seriously?
Either through you or through my friend at the time, Grant. He had it on cassette and he really liked Phil Collins, so probably 1990 maybe, something like that.
Yeah, for me, I think it was driving home from work when I bought the CD, which was either 92 or 93. What's your favourite track on the album?
2 minutes left.
Favorite track on the album would be Why Does It Wish It Would Rain Down.
Yeah, same for me. Your least favourite track from the album?
Probably Colours.
Okay, mine's is Heat on the Street. And what would you give the album in its current incarnation out of 5?
3.
Yep, I would agree with you. I would give it 3 as well. And we've managed to do that in under 3 minutes. Well done. So, Paul, question for you before we actually talk about the album in general in a bit more detail is what do you reckon the most popular song is on the album as per the Phil Collins fans community on Facebook? What do you reckon?
I would say Another Day in Paradise. Although I don't agree with that, but I think that's what...
You think that will be the most popular song?
Yeah.
So the favourite song, as per the Phil Collins fans community, and thanks to everybody on there for voting, very much appreciated. The favourite song was the same as ours, I Wish It Would Rain Down. So these guys have obviously wonderful taste. And rather amusingly, my second favourite song on the album is the same as the group as well, which is Do You Remember? So let's talk a little bit about the album in a bit more detail. So what's your kind of overall thoughts on it?
It's probably better than I remembered because when I think to that time, I just think, oh, terrible 80s production. And because I'm not a massive fan of Another Day in Paradise. I'm not a massive fan of that song. I think it's quite bland, but we'll come into that later. But it was actually a pleasant surprise listening to the album. A lot of good songs, although I can't stand the production on a lot of them. But I mean, it was of its time, so that's not a criticism. But yeah, when I listen to them now, it's just some of the production and the constant need to have like trumpets all the time and stuff. It's just a bit, it gets a bit too much. But I do think it's a good album, despite all that. But it was a product of its time, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, other than the singles, I actually didn't really think much of it when I originally bought it in the early 90s. I thought the album track sounded a bit middle of the road and uninspired, and it has been nice to get the chance to reevaluate them, although I still don't think it's one of Phil Collins' best solo works. For example, I prefer Both Sides and Hello, I Must Be Going more compared to this. I think he writes better, more honest, painful songs when they're autobiographical. I think case in point, the two albums I just mentioned and Face Value are dominated by the breakup of his marriages. And he's got, like John Lennon, a voice that makes you feel that pain. I think he's a wonderful, very underrated singer and performer. So, talking about him being an underrated performer, why do you think that is? Why, despite being one of the most successful artists in musical history, why is he not as highly regarded as his peers, and doesn't seem to have left as big an imprint as other artists? And even just comparing that to the 80s when he was at his peak commercially. When you think of the 80s, you think of what, Tina Turner, Prince, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, a lot of these guys, your Spandau Ballets, Duran Durans, all that kind of stuff, Pet Shop Boys. Now, Phil Collins was as big really as any of them. So why is he not as highly regarded,
maybe,
in your opinion?
Yeah, maybe even bigger than a lot of them. I don't know. It's hard because obviously you have people like established artists like Bruce Springsteen and Tina Turner, but they seem to, when it went to the 90s, they still seem to be quite highly regarded. And it's almost like it's not cool to like Phil Collins. And I do think these things are like cycles, though, and I think it will come back round. But I do think it's really unfair, and particularly in the 90s, because what tends to happen is the previous decade gets criticised a lot in the present decade, and I think like Oasis particularly used to slag Phil Collins all the time because he was seen as part of the 80s and they were very much part of the 90s. But I just think it was really unfair because he's done a lot of really good stuff. But I think what Phil Collins, I read his autobiography a few years ago, and I think what he said was because he didn't know how long the success was going to last, so he very rarely turned down like offers to do things. So he wanted to keep that momentum going, and he thinks that people just got sick of him because he was in everything. He was in Miami Vice, the Prince's Trust concerts, Live Aid. He went from Wembley to Philadelphia, and so I think it's possibly because he's seen as part of the 80s, and now when people look back at the 80s, they see it as quite a selfish time, or the yuppies and money, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I think he's seen as part of that, and I think that's why he gets a lot of criticism, which is really unfair because he's done some great stuff.
The thing is, there was no escape from him in the 80s, whether it was a solo artist, as part of Genesis, or as an actor, or obviously touring. So, I mean, he toured almost the entire decade as a solo artist and in a band. So there really was no escape from him. So if you didn't like him, you couldn't escape him, could you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's unfair, and I think it's because I think Genesis are seen as rock. I think Phil Collins is seen as pop, and I think there's also an inherent snobbiness when it comes to that. If you're rock, you're more credible. If you're pop, you're less so.
You're seen as
which
lightweight.
Is not then really.
Yeah.
You are, which again is to do, I think, Phil Collins an injustice when you actually listen to the songs. But everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I think you're right in a lot of ways. What will probably happen is at some point there'll be a movie about him. He's obviously had a very interesting checkered life, and watch suddenly everybody's saying they've always been a Phil Collins fan after that.
Yeah, no, I think
absolutely guaranteed.
I think
guaranteed.
No, I think you're right. What has been good though in the last probably 15, 20 years is you get a lot of people sampling like In the Air Tonight, and that actually does have a lot of credibility. It's not kind of criticised as much, but that was just as much part of Phil Collins as anything he did. But that seems
Mm-hmm.
that seems to have changed things a bit, where he is getting a bit more credit where it's due. Yeah, rather than Lightweight.
Yeah,
And There
agreed.
Tonight's a classic song. It's quite avant-garde as well, if you think about it. Quite indie and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if you think from his second album, I Don't Care Anymore, you know, again about divorce, separation. I mean, John Lennon would be proud of that. You know, the kind of primal scream type therapy singing and just letting it all out.
Yeah.
People, I think a lot of people want to forget that kind of stuff, which is a shame because it's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Phil live. And I've seen him twice. Once as part of Genesis, once in concert, solo with you.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to see him in '94. Was it?
Yeah. We missed half it though.
I know, and that's all I can think of when I think back to
too.
that show that we. It was a Friday night, if I remember correctly, and it was in Glasgow. We were travelling from Edinburgh,
Traffic was
and I'm sure it was, it was not pouring down as well. But yeah, the traffic was just brutal, and we then missed the opening. God knows how many songs, and that really spoiled it. That's all I can remember. It totally spoiled it.
Yeah, I remember going. It was at the SECC, and I think was it December, maybe November, December, and it was really cold and it was raining, and we missed half of it. So it kind of influenced how you felt about the concert, really, because you missed that. But I think he's a good showman. He's a very good showman, Phil Collins, and you know, when you think back to Genesis when there became three of them, it was because of him really that they became more popular, because he was very charismatic, whereas the other two in the band, Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks, they were just happy to sort of be behind. Whereas Phil Collins was he needed that cheeky chappy charisma that he had, you know, and a great voice as well.
So no, that concert was spoiled. Although with what we've seen was very good. Although I was very lucky that I got to see him in 92.
2 years before. Yeah,
I think it was 92, Edinburgh Playhouse, when the band went on a mini kind of theatre tour of the UK, primarily to get record those shows for overdubs for their live albums that were going to come out, I think that Christmas, if memory serves. So the only time I've ever done it, I actually queued out overnight outside a ticket office to get tickets. Because bearing in mind, at this point, Genesis are one of the biggest bands in the world.
Probably the biggest band in the world.
They're a stadium act. Maybe, yeah. They're a stadium act. And they're playing this venue, Playhouse 2000?
3,000?
Maybe? 3,000?
Yeah,
so it's a small venue for a band of that size. So this was incredible. So I slept out overnight with my friend John Politan, who's a huge Genesis fan. It rained the entire night. I don't think I've ever been as cold in my life. Oh, it's horrendous. And I've talked about another day in paradise. See, when you actually do sleep out in the street, and that was just one night. Horrible. Anyway, we got our tickets, and we were about 10th in the queue. So we got second row tickets, and pretty much in the middle. In the stalls. So literally a couple of meters from Phil Collins and the band. And it was one of the best concerts I ever went to. It was amazing. Really, really good. Really special. So it was worth it. Sleeping out overnight to get the tickets.
And when you look back, you think there's not many times you'd get to see possibly what at the time were the biggest band in the world playing it in a small venue, 3,000, and being that close to the biggest band in the world. That's not something you'll be able to do much, is it?
No, and I think as well because it was the really true fans that had the tickets, because you were only getting them if you were there early doors to get them. So it was a great atmosphere as well. But at one point, I can't remember what song Phil Collins was kind of hamming it up, but he was looking at me right in the eyes, and you're going, Phil Collins is staring at me. This is awesome. But it was brilliant. Really, really good show. One of my favourites of all time. So that kind of makes up for the calamity of trying to see him solo in '94.
Of course, when he plays live, he has a couple of the guys that play live with Genesis also, doesn't he? The guitarist,
that's right,
the drummer. So Chester and Darrell, is it? Yeah, I think it's Darrell.
Time to drum up some good jokes. So, Paul, you got any Phil Collins jokes you can share?
People say I'd never get over my obsession with Phil Collins, but take a look at me now. It's amazing that Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins both went solo back in the day. There was a real exodus from Genesis.
Well, great news. Phil Collins is picking up the drumsticks again. He's got a job at KFC. Why does Phil Collins only count by even numbers?
Oh.
He says he's against all odds. And that is our Phil Collins jokes.
Hey, this is Marv from Pods Like Us, the show where we help you to find your next podcast addiction. And you're listening to Trimming the Musical Fat, a show where Paul and Stephen tell you all you need to know about and more about the music that you love.
So, what songs are going to hang in long enough to feature on the TTMS Supercut of But Seriously? It's time to trim the fat from that album. For selection, we're including all the songs that featured on the original 1989 CD and cassette release of the album. So before we get to the songs, let's talk about the album cover itself, which is a kind of more serious photo of Phil Collins on it with a black background. So it's kind of keeping the theme of his previous albums where it's just a single photo of him on it. What do you think of the album cover, Paul?
I quite like it, even though it's quite basic, I guess you would say, but it does feel this is a really serious album for him, and no pun intended. And I suppose the cover reflects that, just looking quite somber on the front and maybe just feeling tired, because we said he'd worked so much in the 80s. This was like just at the tail end of the 80s, and maybe he was just like emotionally drained after doing this Genesis. And what I quite like when he in 2016 when they did the remastering of all his albums, he recreated the artwork with how he looks now. I thought that was really quite clever, actually. What about you?
Yeah, I think we always used to joke about Phil Collins' album covers because it was always just a photo of him on it. But in retrospect, and especially with, as you say, with the more recent re-releases where he did recreate them with up-to-date photos of himself, they are artistically quite striking as they track the passage of time on him. So yeah, it's a nice theme to have. That said, I don't think there's anything to write home about here, but it's a striking image, and it's obviously iconic as well because it sold that much. So let's move on to the songs, and what we'll do, Paul, we're going to walk through there's 12 songs on the album. We need to trim it down to 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it fits on a single vinyl album. So 12 songs, and we both selected 6 songs that we agreed upon should be on here. And then there was another 6 which we debated. So let's go through, first of all, the songs that are definitely getting a spot on the TTMF Supercut. And the first one is one of the singles, and it is Hang In Long Enough. Let's hear it.
You never thought you'd ever get the taste. You never thought that it could be this good. Just tell me what you want and I'll find the key. Just reach out and touch this all yours. If you hang long enough, you'll do it. Just hang long enough.
Okay, that was Hanging Long Enough, which was the final single from the album. What do you think of it, Paul?
It's not as bad as I remembered it just when I was last week when I went to listen to the album again. I mean, the production.
You thought it was bad?
I didn't think the song was bad. It was a decent song, but it's just the production ruins the song. It's very much of its time, but it's quite a strong opener.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's very forceful. So yeah, final single from the album. It's a great opener. really drives along, courtesy of the horns and the drums. It's got a sweet middle eight on it too. I think Phil Collins is on fine form vocally as well. And lyrically, it seems to be about ambition and hanging in long enough for success. So yeah, good lyrics there. Do you remember the video for this song?
No, what was the video again?
Yeah, it featured Phil and the band on stage in a Titanic-like liner called the USS Udio. Studio, get it?
Yeah.
Which eventually sinks because the band play too loud. So there we go. So Hanging Long Enough gets a spot on the album. The second song that gets a place is the second song from the album, and that is called That's Just the Way It Is.
And I don't know why do we keep holding on? I don't know why, pretending to be oh so strong. Oh, why is there something I don't know? Something very wrong with you and me, or maybe that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Okay, that was Just the Way It Is. Paul?
I don't think it's a great song. A bit bland, and I think Phil Collins can do some brilliant ballads, but this is just. I mean, I don't know if you'd class this as a ballad, but it just feels really quite bland and dull.
I find it's funny. The song and Do You Remember the kind of opening bars, that drum, it's almost identical, and you're just waiting to which one is it? Yeah, it's almost identical. But for me, yeah, it's a good song. Obviously, another single from the album, although not in the US. I think it could do without the 80s guitar on it. I think the back end vocals on it are lovely. They're courtesy of David Crosby of Crosby, Still and Nash fame. And yeah, lovely bit of what sounds like bagpipes at the end. And obviously you've got the marching drums there as well to signify war or the military. So yes, it's a decent song. And according to Collins, the song itself is an anti-war song about the Northern Ireland conflict, the Troubles. And Collins played both the drums and the keyboards on the song. So that is track 2 that makes it. The third track that makes it's one of my favourites, and it is Do You Remember? Let's give it a play.
Did you keep on telling me those lies? Do you remember?
So this song, it's very much of its time. It's not one of my favourites. It's the guitar in it. I mean, I know Elton John, Eric Clapton plays on this album, but the guitar in it sounds a bit like Wonderful Tonight. But it's quite a catchy chorus, and it's obviously, considering the tracks in the album, it's very much, you can understand why that would be a single. But it just feels a bit less than, for me, than, say, One More Night. Something like that. That feels like that's got more heart and soul than this.
Yeah, well, this was his last top 10 hit in the United States. It got to number 4, and it was a Canadian number 1. And I kind of take the opposite view to you. I love this song. And again, sentimental value. It just reminds me of Dad picking me up on a Saturday night in the early 90s while I was working at a supermarket at Hunter's Price in Edinburgh. And obviously this was his Christmas present, and he picked me up and he had the cassette on. I just remember the song coming on, which I hadn't heard before. But yeah, it seems to be about a man whose relationship with their partner ends because of neglect and lies on the part of their significant other. It's got beautiful harmonies on the song throughout, with, I believe, singer-songwriter Stephen Bishop doing those backing vocals with Collins. I think it's got a lovely keyboard motif and just has a feeling of resignation to it. You know, now it's over. But yeah, it's actually one of my all-time favourite Phil Collins songs. So that is track 3 to make it onto the supercut. The fourth one is another single, and it is a bit more up tempo now. Something Happened on the Way to Heaven.
I want you back. How many times can I say I'm sorry? How many times? You know you can run and you can hide, but I'm not leaving unless you come with me. We've had our problems, but I'm on your side. You're all I need. Please believe in me. Oh, yeah.
So, Paul, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven. Does that get your seal of approval?
Yeah, this is a good one. It's nice to have an upbeat one as well, because it does feel quite a low mood type album, a lot of the subject matter. But this is a really nice upbeat song, and I used to love the video as well. The dog in the video, and the guy playing bass, the guy with the big beard. It's just a really catchy song, and it actually used to be used when they were doing the football results at here in Scotland. When the football results were coming on a Saturday, about 4:45, that would be the theme tune as the results were coming up. So yeah, no, it's a good song.
Yeah, so Colin wrote this with Darryl Sturmer, and it was originally wrote for the 1989 American comedy film The War of the Roses. So that was the one with Michael Douglas, Danny DeVito, and Kathleen Turner. However, Danny DeVito didn't like the song, so it never got used. But yeah, it's another single. I mean, I remember this being played to death on the radio when it came out, and it's still, if you're listening to like Absolute Radio 90s or whatever, it's a song you still hear quite a lot. It's very catchy. Your foot will tap to it. It's upbeat. There's nice horns on it. I think there's some great clean hard drum sound on it from Phil Collins. But like you, I remember it more for the video, which, as you say, featured the dog running around from the dog's point of view. And I'll tell you, this is where I learned something. That was the first time that I learned that dogs could only see in black and white. Did not know that until this video. So yeah, Phil Collins provided me with some education through this song. So thanks, Phil.
Which is quite ironic considering what the next track is.
Well, you're jumping the gun because we're not getting to that yet. The next one on the official album, yes, absolutely. The next one that we unanimously agree on is I Wish It Would Rain Down. So I Wish It Would Rain Down. You bought the 7-inch single back in the day, Paul. Still a fan of it?
Yeah, it's a brilliant song and great drumming in it as well, because I think that's also something that gets forgotten about with Phil Collins, how good a drummer he was. And when you think even at Band Aid, you think, he totally held that song. And then, of course, you've got Eric Clapton in this, who's amazing. And at that time as well, Eric Clapton was massive, with his Unplugged album. Or, sorry, that came after this. Well, not long after this. But it's just a really catchy song, and it's quite a sad song, but in a way it's uplifting at the same time as well. I don't know, there's just something about it, almost like gospel-y, hearing that better things are going to come. And I like the video. It's quite a good video. Like I say, it was a bit like the start of a kind of Magic Queen video where they're dressed up like older people and they're in an old sort of theatre. It's all dusty and stuff, and so no, it's a highlight of the album for me.
Yeah, my favourite song on it too. Did you know the track spent a total of 6 weeks at #1 on the Canadian singles chart in 1990?
Right, no, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, so no song achieved that feat in Canada that year, and despite this being one of Collins' biggest solo hits, he rarely ever performs it live. Maybe just too hard to do, I don't know.
it maybe because he doesn't have Eric Clapton to do the guitar or something?
Or maybe a gospel type choir as well, because that's one of the best parts of it. I mean, it's a brilliant epic ballad. You've got the great guitar work from Eric Clapton on it. That gospel choir backing is superb. And yeah, it's a real band song as well. And the lyrics seem to deal with, again, the breakup of a relationship. But yeah, it's a tremendous song, isn't it?
Great vocals as well. The way he holds the notes.
So our last unanimous choice is track 6 for the supercut, and it is the first single from the album, Another Day in Paradise.
Think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, it's just another day for you and me in paradise. Just think about it.
So that was Another Day in Paradise. Paul, what's your thoughts on it?
I'm not a massive fan of it. I know it was a massive hit all around the world, and it's really famous, but it's just really bland. I mean, I know the sentiment of the song. It's hard to make it uplifting because of what they're talking about, but for me, it's just a bit, flat. Flat is the way I would describe it. Because I think you can still do a song about this, but it could still have a bit more to it. But for me, it's probably one of the reasons I would always say I'd prefer Genesis over Phil Collins, because of songs like this, probably.
Yeah, it was his 7th and final single to reach #1 in the US, and it is back in 2009 on Billboard's Greatest Songs of All Time. It was placed 86 on the list. So it wouldn't have been 86 on your list. And obviously it was the first single off the album and the most famous song from it. It signalled a more serious tone for Phil Collins, obviously about the plight of the homeless. And I know he copped some flack for it at the time. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And, what does a multi-millionaire pop star know about homelessness? However, I think for me, the guy was just trying to shine a light on an everlasting, horrible problem. And is that not a good thing, to raise people's awareness and maybe hopefully want to do something about it? As a song, it's catchy, great drums. I think when the drums kick in, really does raise the song. And I think that you've got that main riff, the nice ascending and descending keyboard riff throughout the song. Is very catchy, it's iconic, it's great. And again, lovely backing vocals on it, courtesy of David Crosby. So yeah, big thumbs up for me for that song. So that is our 6 songs in, and the last of our unanimous choices. This is where we had to make some compromises together here. So let's maybe talk about the 2 songs that did not make it on to the Supercut. One of them was my choice. One of them was yours. So my choice was going to be the track number 9, which was All of My Life.
All of my life. Said I'll take a drink with you. Pull up a chair. I think I'll stay. Said I'm up, 'cause I'm going nowhere. There's too much I need to remember. And there's too much I need to say. All of my life.
Paul, you weren't a fan of this. Why not?
Because it's rubbish. No, it's just that sort of keyboard in the background and the saxophone at the start. I mean, I suppose this was 1989, and it's like Careless Whisper was 6 years earlier or 5 years earlier. It just sounds production, and it's just not a very good song, in my opinion.
Okay, well, for me, I think it's a pleasant tune. It's certainly more jazzy than most of the other stuff on the album. I think there's some nice sax on it. I think the best feature in it is its lyrics. So Colin wrote that all of my life is about his relationship with his late father and his regrets to have not had more of a connection with him during his life. So I mean, the sample lyric here: all of my life, there have been regrets that I didn't do all I could. Making records upstairs while he watched TV. I didn't spend the time I should. It's a memory I will live with all of my life. So yeah, it's quite poignant stuff there when you delve into the lyrics. And I mean, you talked about Careless Whisper and the saxophone on it. Here's this might jog a memory here. Don Myrick played saxophone on this song, and he also done the same on Phil's huge hit "One More Night."
Oh, right. That was okay then, because that was a good song though.
So All of My Life is jettisoned. So that was a choice I would have had on it. The one that you would have had on it, which I didn't want, was Father to Son. So let's give that a play right now.
Well, that's alright. Don't know what to do. Remember, she is just as scared as you. Don't be shy, even when it hurts to say. Remember, you're gonna get hurt someday anyway. And you must lift your head and keep it there. Remember what I said. I'll always be with you, don't forget.
So that was Father to Son. So Paul, you wanted on it. What do you like about this?
It's a relatively shortish song. I think it's okay. It's not brilliant. It's what's quite interesting at this point as well. Like we talked about the previous song, is there something about them and their dads at that time? Because obviously, Mike and Mechanics, Mike Rutherford did The Living Years, which I'm sure that came out the same year as this. So it seems to be in the band Genesis that they're talking about things with their dads a lot. It seems to be coming up a lot, like regrets and stuff. So.
Yeah, for me, I just find it a bit bland musically. I think the lyrics are quite twee about being there for his son. And this is a song that I should be able to relate to, having two sons myself, but I just think it's an average tune. If I remember correctly, I'm sure Collins had said it was a ballad about his relationship with his oldest son, Simon. So that's where that one came from. So anyway, those are the two songs that don't make it onto the Supercut, which means we have another four which did make it. Two choices from me, two choices from you. So we'll maybe pick up on the one that I wanted, which is the longest song on the album, which is Colours.
People living without rights, without their dignity. But how loud does one man have to shout to earn his right to be free? You can keep your toy soldiers to segregate the black and white. But when the dust settles and the blood stops running, how do you sleep at night? No matter what you say, it never gets any better. No matter what you do, we never see any change.
So Colours, well, why did I want it on it? For me, this was actually a pleasant surprise to return to, because I didn't give it really the time of day before when I originally owned the album. And it does, if you look at the lyrics, it provides an earnest condemnation of apartheid in South Africa. I mean, sample lyrics here: deep inside the border, children are crying, fighting for food, holding their heads, breaking their bread with a stone. I think musically it sounds a bit more like 80s Genesis, an 80s Genesis prog rock song, with the longer duration and it being broken into two distinct musical parts. I like it, especially the driving guitar riff that comes in after the vocals, along with the stabbing horns and the kind of plinky keyboard. So yeah, for me it's a good tune. And I said I like the horns on it. They're very prominent, and they are played by Earth, Wind and Fire's Phoenix horns. So you weren't a fan of the song. What do you not like about it?
It was probably more to do with attention span, I suppose, because it was almost, 9 minutes long? Or, 8.5 or something. So for me, it just felt like a lot of, it's maybe not a bad song in itself, but it just felt like a lot of the other, it felt the same as the others. A lot of the other songs just sounded the same, and it was like almost 9 minutes. So when you're trying to put an album that's just over 50 minutes or so, it was the obvious one to take off. But it wasn't necessarily that it was a bad song, but it was just like, for a song that's okay, and it's 9 minutes almost. So that was really the reason. But I do, I don't, because I think Genesis did a couple of songs like Domino and Home by the Sea that were like long songs, but I think they were good songs. So I don't think it's a bad thing to do a long song. But this just doesn't seem to work for me.
Let's move on then to the next one. This was one of the ones you wanted on, and that is track 8 from the album, and it is Heat on the Street.
Get up on your feet and shout, stop, stop, look down. Everybody, just see what's going on around you. Stop, stop, look down. Everybody, just see what's going on around you. Stop, stop, look down. Everybody, just see what's going on around you. Stop, stop, look down. Everybody, just see what's going on around. Shout it out, shout it out.
So that was Heat on the Street. You are a fan of this one, so what do you like about it?
It's just, it's good that it's a bit upbeat. I do think he's kind of going over the top with the trumpets and the brass, which I love brass, all that. But I think he sometimes goes over the score at this period, and I think the song shows that. But it's good because because a lot of the songs on the album are quite sad, so it's nice to have quite an upbeat song. I suppose equal that out, maybe different moods and stuff. So, but yeah, it's not a brilliant song, but it's I think I would choose that.
Yeah, but the original vinyl release for But Seriously features a rearranged track listing, and is missing 2 tracks that were on the CD and cassette versions. Heat on the Street and the instrumental Saturday Night and Sunday Morning were the 2 songs that did not make the vinyl release. For me, Heat in the Street, it just sounds like filler to me. Lyrics seem to incite people to rise up. Nothing more to say. It sounds very 80s and just not very memorable to me. So, yeah, wouldn't have made my cut, but I would respect your decision. The next one, so this is the penultimate song that gets on the TTMS Supercut, and this was one of my choices, is Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. So that was Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. That was one that I picked, and I just think it's a cool little 90-second instrumental jam, and it's like some of the instrumental stuff that appeared on Face Value and Hello, I Must Be Going. I just think it's very cool. And Collins co-wrote this with Thomas Washington. You didn't have it on yours. Was that just purely because you thought it was maybe 90 seconds long and a bit insignificant?
Yeah, probably. Actually liked it, but it just felt like for an album when you're trying to get to 50 minutes, and I suppose it's the opposite of the song Colours, and that was a long song, but this, it just felt like a bit throwaway, but it was good. I enjoyed it reminded me a bit of Beef Jerky, John Lennon instrumental on Walls and Bridges. So I actually thought it was quite good, but I just felt maybe a bit overindulgent to put that on at that time. But it is good. I do like it, but yeah, not in that form.
Well, our final song on the Supercut is the final song on the album, and that is Find a Way to My Heart. nice. So that was Find a Way to My Heart. And you liked this one, Paul. You selected it. What do you like about it?
I really like the start and the end. It's almost like feedback and synthesizers, and the actual song when it goes into it, I don't think is great, but I just really like. It sounded a bit like Gary Newman or the Human League, some at the start, or Phil Collins around the early 80s, like In There Tonight. So I just really like the introduction and the way it finishes. So for me, that's the reason I chose it. Just thought it was quite different, and it also sounded a bit like Station to Station, David Bowie, the start of that.
Yeah, it starts a bit like Take Me Home from No Jacket Required. And it does sound a little bit like something that could have been on his Disney Tarzan movie he did soundtrack for. I think it's inoffensive, but not particularly memorable, and it does go on for over 6 minutes. So I just find it a bit meh. But yes, I agree with you. I like the sound effect at the beginning and at the end. That sounds like it's something from a sci-fi movie. That is pretty cool. So we now have the 10 songs that are making our TTMF supercut of But Seriously, and it's just coming in at 50 minutes. The songs are Hanging Long Enough, That's Just the Way It Is, You Remember, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, Colours, I Wish It Would Rain Down, Another Day in Paradise, Heat on the Street, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, and Find a Way to My Heart. So, Paul, based on those 10 songs, you originally gave the album 3 out of 5. What would you give the TTMF Supercut? Would you change that at all?
Probably the same, to be honest.
Oh, would you?
Yeah, probably the same.
Yeah. Oh, well, I would bump mine up to a 4, I have to say, just with losing a couple of those tracks there. I do think it being a little bit shorter and obviously having the songs I prefer does make it better. So yeah, I would raise that to a 4. So it's the final questions. The first of 2. So, Paul, what do you reckon is the most successful Phil Collins song based on streams and physical sales?
In There Tonight.
Correct. Probably not too difficult. And another one. When, as a solo artist, do you think Phil should have called it a day as a recording artist to preserve his whatever you want to call it, his mystique, his status, whatever it might be?
Probably after this album.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because, it comes out in the last album of the 80s, and then, yeah. I think he's done a couple of good singles since then, but I would say, yeah, that would have been a good time to call it a day.
I think certainly from a commercial perspective, yeah, it was his last huge seller, and the last time he was having big hit singles as well. So I think certainly from a commercial perspective, that would have made sense. I'm such a huge fan of both sides that for me that would maybe have been the best one to go out on. I just think there's nice symmetry between that and Face Value, his debut, in that they were both very much home recordings, a bit more stripped back, a bit more personal. So I just think that would have been a nice symmetry between those two albums to have called it quits then. And the thing is, both sides was no slouch. I can't remember the exact sales numbers, but it was still a very, very successful multi-million selling album. Certainly not on the level of the numbers of No Jacket Required and But Seriously, but still.
So both sides, it sold 7.7 million. So, I mean, that's still brilliant.
Yeah, and I think if you were to put that into context with an artist like Prince, Prince's biggest album was far and away Purple Rain, which I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was maybe something past 20 million. His next biggest seller was Diamonds and Pearls, which was maybe about 7.4, something like that. And I think 1999 sold 7.1. From memory serves, they were his 3 biggest sellers. And there you go. This is viewed as a bit of a disappointment for Phil Collins, both sides, because it sold nearly 8 million, which just shows you his popularity. So yeah, for me, that would have been a good one to have done a Billy Joel and decide to stop recording. Still tour and stuff. But yeah, it would have went out on an album that had nice symmetry to face value and was still a significant seller. Okay, it's time to take us home. So how's it been going back to this album today, Paul?
It's been good. It's a better album than I remembered, because I wasn't too keen on, when I was thinking about the album, I was thinking, I don't remember it particularly as enjoying it really. But it is good. I mean, I don't like the production, but it's good, and I just hope that people stop criticising Phil Collins all the time for being not cool and stuff. He's done a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, he most certainly has, and yeah, for me as well, it's been really nice actually to revisit this, because I didn't really think highly of the album from when I had it back in the early 90s. So it's been lovely to go back and give it, I think, a proper listen with more learned ears. So Paul, I think our next episode, where we're going to focus in on albums, is our Queen What If episode, where we're going to look at the band's output from 81 through to 84. Are you looking forward to that?
Very much so, yeah. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what we come up with in that period, and it'd be great to have the Lap of the Pods guys on as well to give their thoughts as well.
I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun with in the Lap of the Pods. It'd be good to speak to the guys again. So yeah, that's going to be Queen What If, and that is we're looking to record that before the end of this month, January 2022, and we think we'll have that episode out for the beginning of March this year. So you can listen to our show on all major podcast providers. You can help support the podcast by becoming a subscriber, and you can do so by going to anchor.fm/TTMF/subscribe. You can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Do you agree or disagree with our comments and selections today? Please let us know by leaving us a voicemail, or email us at trimthemusicalfat@gmail.com. Check out all our podcast albums and TTMF supercuts on our website, which is www.trimmingthemusicalfat.com. It's the end. That's just the way it is. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep tripping.
Bye. Did you say keep tripping or trimming?
Trimming.
Trimming.
That's an entirely different podcast. Men keep trimming.